Okay, well, you wouldn't expect us to start completely on time, but I think we're doing pretty good. Want to thank everybody for joining us today to talk about virtualized audio production. This is an exciting topic, and I want to thank our friends on the network side as well as on the technology side for weighing in on this, and Henry and Carl and Henry again and Glenn and Lucas. This is sort of a fast moving topic, and it's sort of nice to sort of jump on it and talk about what we're doing now, but also what we hope to do in the future, how we're going to get started once production really gets ramped up, and sort of what the wish list is going forward. I want to apologize to Henry Goodman and Lucas for how late it is. I was feeling sorry for Henry because it's 7 o'clock, and then I remembered it's 8 o'clock for Lucas. So there you go. Anyway, want to thank Tom Sahara and Jim Starzinski for helping put this together, and everyone else at SVG, to Marty and Paul and Ken and Jason and Andrew Gable and Andrew Lippy and Alicia and Katie and everybody, and obviously thank the sponsors: Brainstorm, Calrec, Dale, Dolby, Lavo, NTP, Sanken, Shure, Telos. Anybody else I've forgotten? So I think we're going to begin by just sort of talking about what we've been doing with talent and what we're sort of getting cobbled together to deal with the feeds we're dealing with as things get a little bit busier here on the network side. So I think I'll bring in Carl, who's
hiding.
I'm going to kill my camera and turn it over to Tom. Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Roger. Yeah, Carl's will kick it off, just giving us an idea of things that they've been doing as they've started putting productions together and getting things on the air, and then we'll follow that up with Henry so he can talk about what they've done on their side. So I think that'll give us at least an idea of what people have been doing and how they've managed to get productions on air, and you know, with all the restrictions of not traveling people and not gathering large groups of people into small tight trucks and control rooms. So I think Carl has a few slides that we can start to kind of just get an idea of what you've been up to, Carl.
Yeah, well, thanks. First and foremost, can you hear me?
Yes.
That's always the important one. Yeah, so thanks for the invite. We haven't done that much actually with announcers just yet, because we're obviously not back to sport, but we certainly have ideas of what we want to do. I sent Roger over. Hey, Roger, do you want me to share, or do you want to share that PDF? Because I have some sort of photographs from.
I had an annoying Adobe problem. If you can share it, okay, that would be great.
Okay.
Or I can
stand by for last minute technology. We all know how that goes.
What could go wrong?
Well, first I got to find the little Go webinar thing, which I've never used before, and then look for the thing that says share.
Let me.
Well, Tom can share it. I'm sorry. I meant to.
Okay. I've got it. Let me call it up.
Yeah, but in the meantime, so we're looking for answers. Yeah. Obviously, we think announcers are going to be at home. Certainly I won't say our top tier announcers, but all the announcers we can think of at the moment are more than likely going to come from home for the near future until we decide. And I was actually talking to Sky about this earlier on. It's a little bit easier in the UK because their announcers can get to venues by driving. We don't have the same advantage here in the States, where announcers have to take a plane to to go from East Coast to West Coast or something like that. So we're certainly looking at having our announcers at home and looking at technologies which we have some experience of having used before, such as tie-line, IP codecs, and using that sort of stuff. And then for on cameras, using things like high vision, not high visions, but live views, which we've used quite a lot of. How you doing, Tom? Do you want me to see if I can go from my side, or?
Well, I see Roger just got control.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm working on it.
Or if Roger, you want to kick control to me, I can.
Okay.
But yeah, so we are, and there's certain other things like for VOs where we just have talent who wants to do a voiceover. We're using Comrex Opals. So again, audio over IP. And it's really very easy from a user end. A lot of the things that we're trying to get out there are really things that are easy from the talent perspective to be able to use, things that are familiar to them, and then obviously going in and we'll presumably have somebody on site to set everything up, as I think we've all seen from a news type operation days. Crews will go in, they'll set something up, and then leave the talent to fire it up every morning. So just to run through what we're doing in general with NBC control rooms, this is a PDF, so I'll just start with this. This is sort of an overview of TD, audio, AVS playback ingest. You can move along to the next one, Roger or Tom, whoever's controlling. Just scroll down. There you go. So TD director based out of a home in Stamford, house in Stamford. Bottom left-hand corner is the control. Well, that was actually a couple of weeks ago. Actually, that's fine. It was a Sony switcher control, and actually it was fairly limited control with that. But since an upgrade we did about a week ago, we've got full control over the switcher. Top left-hand corner shows a little kind of basically what it looks like at home. The mixer, virtual mixer. And then the KP panels, everything runs off a Cisco VPN switch. So basically everybody has a KP panel at home, VPN back to Stamford facility. And then the multi-viewer there is, we're using high visions, which I think the whole world is at the moment. So we're building high vision, which is a very fast video, low latency video codec. And we'll be basically embedding those. We'll be making the multi-viewer feeds in our BOC, our Broadcast Operations Center in Stamford, and actually sending them, to the home already pre-built. So you can move along, because I don't want to spend too much time on basically what everybody's doing. After TD, Chiron, pretty similar. They have direct control, actually RDP control of their Chiron machine in Stamford. Headquarters, so to speak, and again, Cisco switch running high visions. You can move along to audio, I think it is next, which is always very interesting. Yeah, so audio control basically at a Norwalk in Connecticut. Down the center, again, everything's through a Cisco, I think it's 600 VPN switch. The center laptop has access to the Calrec H2O core for recalling desk setups. The bottom left has an iPad with Calrec Assist running on it, which remotes to the faders in the Calrec console. I think it's go up to about 192 faders, but we're trying to keep it to 8 because that's all that can fit in, on one page of the iPad. And this is limited mixing. We're not doing big shows here. We're doing something, pretty simple. And so also with the iPad, you can control your OGS and main routing. And then above the iPad is a remote everts panel for audio router control into the console. And then to the right side, the small tablet is above the KP panel, is RDP'd into our Enco system, audio playback system. And then the KP panel obviously is once again through the switch. And actually, we're using the high vision. Normally we would use it for audio return, but we found actually with Unity Connect, the audio is much quicker and coming back through Unity Connect. And so we're actually, Mike DiCrescenzo, the senior NBC A1, is actually using Audio Hijack, which is a capture and streaming software to actually, look at loudness and things like that, program loudness. So that's quite quite a neat setup. And the only thing really missing, he says, he's actually enjoying the setup, but he's missing EQ and dynamics, which we can all, you know, feel his pain with that. Next one, Raj, Tom, please. Next one's going to be EVS, and that's you know, IP director in the monitor on the left, the KP panel, and what else? Yeah, so they've got basically 2 channels in this IP director. They can drop you know, a couple of channels, drag and drop clips into the Vision into the TD switcher, as well as the CalRec console. And the next one is going to be our sat ops. And this is, I keep looking at this picture thinking that when we're all out, you know, post pandemic and we're all having parties, that I want to go to this place and light that fire and have a nice party in that room, because that's a great TV. So that's basically our sat ops are doing our QC from home, but that's a nice little setup. And then next one is ingest. Tom, you want to say something? No.
No, go ahead.
And then ingest tied into Stanford again, into our BOC, our Broadcast Operations Center. And the multi-viewer, as you can see, was made in BOC specifically for that purpose, with the ingest software on the laptop on the left. And then a couple more. Next one is basically RTS comms out of Florida, looking after the trunk masters, and that's basically where all our comms for both, you know, Golf Channel and NBC Sports are being QC'd out of and controlled. And the next one is a producer workstation, basically, which is just at home. He actually has a high vision return, but you know, the KP panels are the things that have really opened up all lines of communication for everybody, making it very easy to, you know, if we all know how key the communication is. And then the final one is a transmission done from Chris Connolly's home in Monroe in Connecticut, and that's where he'll control all the live views. He's got you know, iPad mostly for using for teleconferencing and stuff like that, but you know, control of you know, most of the live views and a lot of the BOC stuff as well. So it's just a general idea of what we're doing from I mean, everything that was, you know, probably a week ago, and we've changed some stuff, but generally things for what we're doing at the moment, that's what's happening from our side.
Okay, thanks, Carl. It's really interesting how you managed to you know, put all this together in such a short time. How did you get the ideas of, you know, what you're using, and you know, how did the team figure out, you know, what challenges did the team encounter as they, you know, figured out how to split that workflow of, you know, everyone being in control, now everyone being spread out across, you know, even across the country.
Yeah, the interesting thing is we had a conversation this morning about it, that, you know, there's a lot of people using a lot of, you know, cloud-based facilities, and really what we tried to do is we tried to use what we were used to, actually. You know, be it KP panels. I mean, you can get a lot of virtualized intercoms, you know, talking on your phone and stuff like that, and all that stuff works great if you've used it before. And I think that for a lot of people, the KP panels were something that was user-friendly, I guess, and something that they were used to. So that really helped for that. And then, you know, we started looking to what else High Vision could do, and obviously High Vision, I think also from a manufacturer's point of view, everybody stepped up their game very quickly to be able to facilitate an absolutely global need for, you know, fast audio and video and communications. So I think it was kind of, we were a little bit, I guess like everybody here, we were all kind of slow to start, unless you're a news organization, you know, and news got into this pretty quickly because they've been doing this sort of thing for a long time. So convincing a producer that they could be at home, you know, and then basically having the right people, certainly in our organization or any of my colleagues' organizations, to be able to say, you know, we can set high visions can be the fast video returns to everybody, whether that high vision is on your iPad or, you know, your putting it into a talent's home or an editor's home. So you're really having to convince people that the technology is there and it's fast. So I think we didn't face any more challenges than anybody else, apart from the fact that we hadn't really done this before. So
was that the biggest concern, Carl, with the operators? It was the timing of things and whether they were going to get things as quickly as they're used to.
Yeah, latency and being able to marry audio and video, and then be able to have the for a talent, or sorry, for a producer at home to be able to cue a talent at home. I mean, the latency involved in that, and you can tell, we're all looking at shows that are being produced remotely, and it's on an iPad or it's on a iPhone, and we all know the issues that they're having, and they're all generally, it takes a long time for them to answer. You can hear the question coming through. So I mean, we're all dealing with the same issues, and we're all trying to produce top tier TV, but with a limited amount of resources. But to your point, I think just timing was sort of key, and making sure everybody, bit like doing a webinar, everybody can work the audio and the video and get on air on time.
Yeah, thanks, Carl.
Carl, what was the technical? How much bandwidth did each user require? Was it the standard? I mean, DSL connection? Did everybody have to have a 1 gig cable modem?
You know what? Everybody, it's we don't have a special license to go to Optimum in my neck of the woods and say, we need to up this bandwidth to 400 megs like tomorrow. So for everybody, we had to deal with what they had in their homes, and then since then we've been upgrading. So it's sort of the cart following the horse, as far as that's concerned, because we're no more important than Mr. and Mrs. whoever down the road who want to upgrade their web because their 4 kids are streaming. So, but yeah, bandwidth is a hog. But for most of the stuff, it's all codec based. So you want low latency, and even if the quality is not good on the high vision return getting to the talent, it just has to be quick. That's the importance.
Okay, thanks, Carl, for giving us that rundown. I think many of us, after our initial webinar, were looking forward to the first live sports, and turns out that Henry was involved in a lot of that. We all eagerly watched baseball coming out of Korea to see what the audio would sound like without audience, but Henry and the team at ESPN had to figure out how to bring the feeds in and how to get commentators onto the feed. So Henry, what were some of the challenges that you faced in those first days of figuring out how to put live games back on the air without people in your facility, or just the skeleton crew in the facility, yet all your producers and talent working out of their homes?
Well, I think the first challenge that we had was time. Time was not on our side. Just like Carl was saying, that as the COVID-19 is starting to escalate,
Henry, your mic's cutting out.
You hear me? Okay, can you hear me? Check. Oh, good. Can you hear me?
You're kind of gating a little bit.
Gating too much? Okay, just stand by, please.
Okay, while Henry's working on his microphone, for those of you who weren't with us on the last webinar, where we talked about doing audio of games without crowds in the audience, we were all again listening to. We all tuned into those games to see what the effects were, and whether it was a bad experience or not. And surprisingly, after the first couple of games, it turned out where things seemed to get into a pretty good spot. At least the audio seemed to be somewhat tolerable. It was amazing after maybe an inning or so, you kind of got used to the crowd not being there.
Yeah, I think maybe to tell a little bit out of Germany for a second. So German Bundesliga just kicked off again on the last weekend. And so there was a huge discussion, maybe comparable to the last panel, about how to deal with the whole situation, because obviously there's no crowd. And so while all the sound that comes out of the pitch becomes even more important, because you can for sure hear that even more. So for our customers using a kick system, this became even more valuable. That's what they told us from immediate first steps into the new kind of different season that they are now having to deal with. On the other hand, while a lot of the broadcasters have this kind of, okay, no artificial sound policy, which I can fully understand and stick to, and well, it needs to fit somehow to what you see, right? We also have people like Sky in Germany who actually decided for having some kind of MIDI keyboard DJ who's playing out sound effects according to what's going on the pitch. And yeah, they have to kind of delay their whole processing chain, their whole on-air chain based on that. But actually, it was not too bad. It was also not too bad. And yeah, it's exciting what we will see over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, and I'm sure they also had to go through the social distancing and other policies.
Absolutely.
Well, I think we lost Henry. So I know, Glenn, like we were talking, you started playing around with some of these virtual mixing systems. So, what have you been playing with, and what's your take on how do you deal with this remote mixing?
Well, there's a big question mark that kind of goes along with it. Is where is it's the centralized versus decentralized production model. We've been doing a centralized production model for 7 or 8 years, where we have limited the number of people that are actually at the venue, and they've been working in the studio. With the current situation, that kind of has kickstarted some things that, now we're going to start moving announcers out to their own homes. We call it at home. So the at home production is actually at home, and the move to the cloud is going to be the next cliff that some of us are going to fall off or jump off. So we've been experimenting. I've been watching things like some of the esports guys using Grabio, some of them using vMix with a Teradici client. So the vMix software is really running in AWS, and the controller is at home using a Teradici client on their PC at home, and they're really running the vMix in the cloud. That combined with NDI is going to give you some advantages. We're not quite there yet. The advantage for me is that I have kind of until August before I have to really get all that audio figured out, and how it's going to work, not only for the presenter, whether they're going to be at home or whether they're going to be at the venue. I have to figure it out for all the controller where it's just like Carl's, everybody is decentralized, everybody's dispersed, they're all working from home. So in the vMix, how is the Chiron going to be operated? How is the I mean, the switching's the fairly easy part, actually. It's extra graphics, data from a scoreboard. How does that actually get into AWS so that can be then controlled by the Teradici client? So we're doing some stuff that may be moving the mix control actually out to the venue again. So, and we can RDP into a controller, and now an engineer can theoretically control that mixer in the field. He gets a return off the Teradici client in program, and it's all in time. There's going to be some latency, but another advantage for me is that I have that essentially a local area network on the I2 backbone. So latency for me is pretty short. So that's kind of where we're at. We haven't made any decisions yet on what we're doing, but we're doing a lot of R&D right now that has a mixing core on site and I've been operating it from my home here, and it's similar to what Carl's doing, although he's got kind of a hybrid of a centralized and decentralized. The core, the audio core, is still in the plant. His Calrecs are still in the plant. I'm moving mine out to the field, sort of, and then controlling it that way. So there's a lot of ways to do it. It's not there's no one solution.
Well, I think you hit a very interesting point of the at home, because I think this whole pandemic has really changed the view of what the business could be for. I get a lot of reports from CFO and CIO, and they're certainly concentrating on looking at what this pandemic is doing on their office real estate. What equipment can they out their facility and either put into the cloud or relocate it somewhere else, so it's not having to be staffed by people in offices. So I think this pandemic's really accelerated that push to, as you said, decentralize and move operations out to where the people can easily access it. And I think one of the things that I've seen out of the CFO reports is they see this as a way of improving efficiency of operations, because people don't have to travel anywhere. They can work from wherever they are. So that's where it comes from Henry and Lucas as manufacturers of the equipment. What's your thoughts on where the technology is, and where do you think would be going? I think Glenn brought up an interesting point of being able to just go to his computer and control the entire desk from wherever he is. So I'll start off with Henry, and then Lucas, you can follow up with that.
Well, that technology is already here. I mean, we've had that sort of technology for quite a long time, and it's a question of, I think it's interesting to listen to the panel and how the different approaches that people are taking, and in our view, it's a lot about at this point, it's a lot about how you control. Where you're controlling the console from. Is it a physical control surface? Is it a virtualized control surface? Where's the operator actually sitting? Obviously at home it's easier with a virtualized control surface, but that might not be enough. Do you want to have a physical control surface at home as well for some of the bigger shows? That's perfectly possible. There's no reason why you can't distance a console control surface from its DSP core, for example, and have that link over TCP/IP link back to wherever the core is. So that technology is already there. I think what we haven't done in the past is sort of played with it as much as we played with it over the last few weeks, and really thought about how it can impact on where people are and the efficiencies that it can reap us. And it's really interesting to see how that how people are making different approaches to that. And it's obviously our job at Calrec and Lucas's job as well to enable that in as wider way as possible, because there isn't a one fix solution to this. You know, different situations are going to call for different for different solutions, whether that's individuals sitting at home with an iPad or individuals sitting at home with an Apollo console, you know, or whether they're controlling an Apollo console remotely, which is even remote from the DSP core. All this sort of technology is fundamentally there. It's not particularly new, and is something that we can use. We can open up, if you like, to you guys to help you and facilitate you get what you want and where you want to get to in terms of not moving people around as much, getting the efficiencies out of it, and ultimately being safe, I guess, in the short term.
And Lucas?
Yeah, I can just emphasize what Henry said. So he's perfectly right. The technology is there already. We see that since a couple of years. So it kind of kicked off a little bit maybe with NEP in Australia, who tried to lift the bar of what's possible. From my perception, we're just in a situation that we maybe have a little bit different drivers of what we're doing right now. And yeah, as a manufacturer, we of course at the moment try to help our clients and everybody out there in the industry as best as we can to move forward. So while we maybe saw IP being a driver for this kind of decentralized operational approach over the last couple of years, at the moment it's just the need, so that we need to be able to do something. And so I really like Carl's picture he showed from the NBC producer, because there was a kitchen in the back, and that actually doubles up perfectly what we're currently thinking about and doing, what we call mixed kitchen. So how people are able to remote their Lavo desk from their homes wherever they are. And we actually put quite some time into that and how that can be done. And we talked about acceptance earlier. So how can we convince people or A1s or audio guarantees that they are able to work from home and to get their mix done? And I think there are certain things that enable that. And first of all, of course, it's having a multi-view, having some kind of visual control over what's happening. But second, especially for, we're talking audio here, so especially for audio guys, in the end, it's faders. So, and as Henry said, yeah, we can all distribute our consoles around. However, it's not really realistic that we ship an Apollo console or an MC296 or a Vista X to someone back at his home and install it there, hook it up to the internet. So for us, it was more the approach that we want to build something with commercial off-the-shelf products. So it can be Lavo in the back end. The back end is back at the truck or in the data center, back at the production facility. But it needs to be simple and cheap at the A1's house. So we started to build a mixing environment just based on touch screens, of course. Where you can control your equalizers and dynamics, where you can control the whole routing environment. So for a Lavo desk, there's really a lot of things possible based on MX GUI, which is software that runs natively in the desk. But what we actually did, we just took any kind of DAW controller, so any kind of Mackie Hui talking interface, and hooked it up to this MX GUI, and you can have 8, you can have 16, you can have up to 32 real hardware control faders that you can control, that you can use to remote control your console. And so this is really something that was important to us, because we see clients and we see colleagues trying to build up a audio control room in the garage where they put in a small or mid-sized mixing console. However, I'm not really convinced of that approach, because bringing multi-channel audio back to your A1's house, processing it there, and then bring back the finalized mix, and that's what I understood from Carl and Henry, both, that they do not really see that as a reasonable approach, because it just may affect the thing that we're all working for. So what is our product? It's the TX going on air. And so if we feed the multi-channel audio back to somebody's house, we just put it on risk, because we can do that based on codecs and it might run quite reliable, but we don't have guaranteed internet connections to everyone's house back. So at least if you do, I'm wow, but well, at least we in Germany and Europe, we don't. And so we do not at all want to put the on-air TX on risk, so that it might be affected by failure. So that's why we went for the approach. Okay, let's leave the backend in the truck, in the data center, where it's safe, where it's secured, where it can use the regular ways that we know, because it was mentioned earlier, it's not time for a revolution. Let's stick what we're used to and just make the best out of the situation and adapt as much as we need, but not like try to put a revolution on the whole audio world. I think it's not the perfect time right now to do that. And so so we call that project Mix Kitchen. Just we like the name, and so we are only putting back some control room monitoring via codec, and well, we're not fixed on anything, so it can be the Unity Connect codec. We made quite good experience with Lucy, and actually we're starting off a webinar series based exactly on that topic. So I don't want to stretch it furthermore. So we will see some webinars coming up from our end to tell how people can really enable that workflow, what kind of controllers they can use. And so I'm using a $250 MIDI controller with some pretty nice for the price point motor faders. But you can take whatever you get at the next guitar shop and hook it up to your mixing console. We have some ways of how you can map this fader panel to decent spaces of the console, so that you're not really limited to 8 faders. Mm-hmm. But of course, this works for kind of trained productions, so things that we know. Of course, you won't do the big next Saturday evening show based on that. But then, as Henry said, then just use your Apollo and put it onto your garage. That's beautiful.
Now, if we had a room big enough to fit in Apollo. So Mr. Rousseau's back. So Henry, if you could just kind of talk about what ESPN's gone through, and just so we can just get another perspective of these productions of people having to do their part out of their garage or kitchen.
Well, first of all, can you hear me better this time?
Got you.
Okay.
Yes.
It's interesting. I mean, literally, I just had the same problem that we experience all the time. A poor internet connection, something goes wrong, rebooting a computer. I mean, these are the things that are challenging us now on a day-to-day basis. But just getting back to the very beginning of what I was saying was when the COVID was really becoming more prevalent in the country, parts of our transmission team, our graphics department, a lot of other departments realized that they were going to be essentially evacuated from the building and being forced to work from home. So one of the first things that we did was to establish communications within their various groups. So we ended up using Unity, the Unity app, and we ended up with over 300 people just on that with various groups. So we had transmission, like I said, graphics, engineering, even remote, so that everybody could stay in touch. And then transmission kind of planning for the future, had set up remote access from their homes. So they were able to bring in the various feeds. Fortunately, I don't have any nice pictures like Carl has. But one of the things that we started doing, our first task was getting at least some of our shows back up on air. And that the first show that we were doing was the basketball show, which is the jump out of Seaport. So we had already had a Simply Live V-Box at Seaport, and we ended up remoting into that box with our director in LA. I think the producer was also in California, but then we had graphics in Bristol, and the talent was scattered throughout the country. So what we ended up doing was utilizing TVUs at their locations, but then we augmented that with Unity, in that it allowed them to hear each other closer to real time and do the Q&A, so that you don't end up like the morning shows when they're stepping on each other, and learning how to deal with those issues. And again, the whole idea behind all of this was to try to keep talent in familiar surroundings and try to make it easy for them. Some are technical and others aren't, and basically all you want to be able to tell them is turn the switch on, adjust this, and then you're on the air, and we'll talk you through it. You feel like you're a call center trying to help people out. But then after the jump, we worked on Around the Horn, and that worked out very well. And then we started doing a game of Jump on the NBA. That was interesting too. That was a posted show, but that worked out well. And then we got a call that baseball might be coming back, and it was the Korean baseball. And we had about a week to come up with a solution and actually get commentator kits to the house. And luckily, Carl Ravitch, who was our primary commentator for baseball, is in a couple towns over. So we really wanted to use him and his location as the first test for this. And then the second commentator, Eduardo, he is down in Miami. So what we ended up doing is we wanted to come up with a kit that was very simplified, something that was easy to operate. So we ended up getting MacBook Pros, and we ended up getting the Glen Sound Inferno, and utilizing Dante Virtual Sound Card in the MacBook, and then loading it with Connect. We were able to tie back to Bristol. And if you're familiar with the Inferno, the Inferno has got 7 bidirectional talkback circuits. So we divided those up into, originally it was a mix and an IFB. And then a couple days later, the talents asked us if we could just take out the IFB and let them start to mix things. When you start to compare the way the Europeans handle their commentary systems, they are used to creating their own mixes and balancing out the system, like when you're doing a World Cup or Euros or something like that. The US guys, they just wanted one button, push talk, and that's it. But we knew that we needed to make them feel comfortable with a commentary system that they were kind of similar to what they've had in the booth, and also the ability to directly talk to their partner, their talent partner. So coming up with the Glen Sound boxes, we were able to get the mix minuses, the talent to talent, graphics, a researcher for stats, the producer, a helpline directly to us, and then standard talkback, cough switch. And all that was in just a nice small package. And then we were trying to figure out what we were going to use for return video. And we started testing out the Blue Jeans, the Teams, all these other things. And then we started using Zoom. And we found that Zoom just had such low latency, and it was very, very stable platform, that we ended up using that for the primary output of the control room. And then we added more Zoom servers back at Seaport, and subsequently down in transmission. And so now we're able to add the other talent to that feed, and also any graphics or anything like that. So talent is really watching their monitor and calling the game almost as if it was live. The other one of the things I think Carl, you mentioned was the modem speed. You asked about that. we have our traffic department that was actually checking with the talent's local modem speeds, because I mean you're at the mercy of whatever it is that they have. One of the talent, well, I'll go back to baseball. Carl Ravage's house, he had awful speed, and so we upgraded his plan, but then that crashed his modem because he had an old modem. And you're finding out where people put this stuff, for one thing, and when was the last time they even knew, turned it on. So we're ending up having to go through every talent's house, find out where the modem is, what rev they have, and make sure it's updated to handle the higher download speeds and upload. And we ended up actually boosting some of them because they were awful. But one quick story was the host of Around the Horn. He left New York City and went up to Vermont. He was up in the boonies, and he had something like a download speed of 2 meg and upload of 0.6. And that was just not going to fly. So we ended up using a Cradlepoint, cellular-based Cradlepoint, and that was able to boost his down and upload speeds to make air. We've been also using vMix out in the field. International is using Kiswi because from an international standpoint, they can't even go into their facilities. They're completely locked out. So they're looking to use Kiswi as a means of just doing a complete production remotely from their homes. So that's about it for baseball. We've got some other events coming up. We've got boxing that's coming up, and right now we've acquired quite a number of laptops and Glen sound boxes to meet the current demand and future demands of whatever production is throwing out at us.
Can I ask a question?
Yes,
Henry, what's interesting about that is it seemed like Talkback is a huge thing. And of this, the Inferno boxes obviously give you 3 talkbacks. So did it drive you towards the Inferno because it had multiple talkbacks, or just in general you wanted to, you just liked the box? I mean, was it a talkback drive or?
Well, the interesting thing, Carl, was that at IBC, Glen Sound was introducing a new box that had, I think, 4 talkbacks in it, and it was really, more compact. Yeah, and I was actually looking for that, and talking to Arnie, it wasn't ready. And then I thought maybe just 1 or 2 talkbacks, but then as we started talking to production and started thinking this through, we realized that the stats person was going to be sitting at home. They needed to be able to talk in through their Unity app and to connect and back out. And so it just started adding up, and I only thought that we were going to need 4, maybe 4 talkbacks, but then it just kind of blossomed up. So out of the 7, we have 1 spare. So, but they really have taken to it very well, and that was, I think, that overall that was the surprising part too, that the talent understood the situation, and nobody really complained about it, that it was it was different, but they took to it very well, and I mean, that was all pretty pleased as punch for that.
I think that's a good point, because in the end, everybody's just keen to go back to work, isn't it? So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and it seems that Talkback and Communications are, obviously the most critical point, because if you can't coordinate these people together, everything falls apart. And so far we've been able to deal with this because the shows have been relatively simple. But if this model tends to go forward, we're going to have to think about, how do we integrate these comm systems with the audio, because we can't keep mashing these systems together. I mean, we've come up with these quick down and dirty fixes, but I think if we try to move this forward as an initiative where we're going to start actually producing content regularly in this fashion, where we have to come up with some kind of solution to make that communications easier. So from Lucas and Henry, what do you think about are there ways that we can help the audio staff manage that communications? Because that always seems to be the, oh, by the way, that ends up bogging their efforts down, because you know, everyone thinks, oh, communications is audio, so we'll throw it at the audio guys. You know, with thoughts?
Yeah, 20% of the
Yeah,
time,
that's
80% of the headache, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
50% of the show, 90% of the problem.
You know what, Tom, I think in some ways the communications seem to have, between everybody seems to have sorted themselves out pretty well. I think now we have to see, you know, what's the redundancy in those comms systems? You know, is it going to stay up? Do we have a UPS? Do we have a backup? You know, if we're using Unity, do we have another server, or, you know, KP panels? I mean, what can go wrong? How do we stay up if we have a failure? I think in general, it seems that comms wise, we seem to have come up with pretty, you know, high-end professional systems that work very well. So maybe that doesn't need as much as an overhaul, apart from the thinking about, you know, what if, you know, because Unity
Well,
is very strong, you know, as is obviously RTS on a remote panel.
Well, if I could just throw a couple things in. For us, we've got 2 talent. So if one talent's house goes down, the other talent's going to cover. If the internet goes down, chances are you've lost your cable. Chances are you've lost the feed. I mean, you could go back to a telephone and phone it in, but what are you looking at that point? I mean, we talked about UPSs, but then putting a UPS in every talent's home. And by the way, too, I don't know if you guys noticed, but Amazon Prime is not 2 days anymore. It takes a long time to get this stuff. I put an order in last week and it still hasn't gotten here. Stuff that we got from Joe Proud at Dale is normally an overnight on ground. It took over 4 or 5 days. So now what was, you know, front and center and you needed it right, you needed it yesterday, you're going to be lucky if you get it next week. And then trying to find stuff that is in stock. B&H, they're out of monitors. They're out of a lot of stuff. All the other places online, it's hard to get parts and pieces now because everybody's working from home and everybody's utilizing, you know, all the resources.
And yeah, to your point, actually, Henry, and I don't know if you guys know this, but other people are living in those homes when the announcers are working at home. So, I mean, you tell, you know, nobody's allowed to do homework and nobody's allowed to live stream when you're on air. So we're dealing with a lot of issues that, you know, there's a lot can go wrong.
Oh, absolutely. We've experienced it too. Basically, please don't download a meeting. But luckily for us, KBO is on so early in the morning that everybody's still morning.
and the nation or the national presenter who's doing their live hit from their bathroom with the thin walls and the echo.
We did an esports event where one of the commentators literally was in their bathroom because that was the only quiet spot in the house.
Isn't that where one of the Supreme Court justices was? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Remember to mute your mic.
Yeah, but I guess, Henry, the point you make is that we are all heavily relying on proprietary hardware for some bits and pieces. So looking at your place with a glance down in furnace. So what do you do if the unit dies? So out of whatever reason, normally you would just call system service and they hook you up with a new unit in 5 minutes. But well, you can't do that if all people are back at their homes. And so same thing applies for the Evertz routing panel at Carl's example for the audio guy. So having things virtualized is certainly a good thing, so that you're able to RDP into whatsoever server or AVS that your facility is running, and you can still have some access. And that was the main reason for us that we at some point integrated VSM natively into the console surface. So no matter which MX GUI you hook up, and you can run it on Linux, on MacBooks, on Windows machines, doesn't matter. It always brings a VSM panel right back at your home. So it always has this sidebar where you can show up your VSM panel that you would also use if you have a VSM system at your facility. So to avoid these kind of situations that you get stuck in not being able to do anything anymore because that specific computer that was running that specific software died, or because that specific hardware went away. So that's really for me and for the people I'm talking to kind of the biggest challenge, because there are already so many single point of failures, so many things that can go wrong. So how can we kind of get rid of at least some of them?
Yeah, we've been looking at quick links, SD55, and kind of a virtual based sort of, basically running off the talent's laptop in some fashion, and then all being controlled and monitored in their web GUI, and then coming back to us. So, but again, there's a lot of points of failure that may or may not be easily fixed. I mean, if their internet goes down, all right, you're out until the guy in the truck comes and splices more wire in. If your computer goes down, okay, maybe you have a backup computer. That's semi-economical. And do you have to send two infernos in case one breaks? Now the bottleneck, really the big one point of failure is that internet connection. That's
unless you can bond.
Probably where you're going to find the most problems.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about putting cradle points in at every home, and then at some point you have to ask yourself, I mean, where's the diminishing returns on your investment and the backup? I mean, we always have backup encos, wherever you're at. You always have either a spare server or laptop, and it's always critical. I mean, my God, and you're putting stuff in people's homes, hoping that nobody trips on a wire, pulls a cord, and it's going to come up the next day after they get off air. And unless you've got multiple lines coming in and you've got the demarc for the family side, and then you've got your side, that's something that we're learning as well. It's very difficult to make those decisions, and it's a cost factor.
Maybe there's a thought somewhere that now we're going to have not backup equipment or backup internet connections. We're going to have backup announcer who's just on call, ready to go whenever he's needed.
Well, that's what Henry's doing, isn't it? He's basically you've got two talent in two locations, each at home, and they're providing a degree of redundancy in that way.
Yeah, and actually we have used them like that. We did have a failure, a temporary failure, and the talent just picks it up. They kind of know this ahead of time.
Yeah, but maybe to pick up Tom's question and just give it back to the group, because for me it sounds a little bit like that there are a lot of technical solutions and we kind of have things working in a way, and most influences are coming from the outside that we cannot really control. But to pick up the comms topic, what would you expect from us as a manufacturer? So Henry and myself, standing for Calreg and Lavo, to make even the technology that seems to be somehow working better and more integrated, maybe, or more reliable, considering that there are effects that we unfortunately do not really have under our control.
Yeah, well, thank you, Lucas. I think we have some questions. Roger, did you?
I want to tee this off a little bit. We've got a couple of mixers, number of mixers listening in intently on this, but I'm going to jump the queue and ask the first question, which is there a model? A lot of people have home studios. The audio portion is really important. And is there a model for somebody to be prepared to permanently mix from home? And if we have a high profile mixer like a Fred Aldis or Scotty Prey or one of those guys, does it make sense to work out what you have to do commercially to drop a control surface at their place and get them a business class modem and a UPS and everything else, and have that person work from home? And
God, I hope not.
If they're willing to work 4 days a week, one show a day.
No A1 is going to make that decision, and I hope that decision wouldn't come down, or it's going to come from finance people. I don't think it's going to come from any decision made by an A1.
Well, here's the thing, is that the economics of this are, we're doing stuff out of necessity, that we're experimenting with stuff, and there's going to be some economic kind of shakeout of, hey, sending all these people and cramming them into a remote truck is not only not safe, it doesn't make sense economically. So are we going to try to come up with another solution, or will these solutions be sort of experimented with, well, what if the audio person was normally in a fixed place? So it could be in Connecticut, it doesn't have to be in Phoenix, but whatever. Could they be in a fixed place and other than crammed into a remote truck over the long term?
Well, we've been
Well,
doing
we're sort of
that.
doing it.
We're doing that for more than 50% of our shows. Our mixers are at home. Our mixers are in a centralized location. There's no, they essentially go to the office and mix the show.
If I could just interject one thing, is, depending on the company, whichever company you're working for, CDC guidelines, all the stuff that's coming out right now, not too many people are flying. Depending on what the restrictions are going to be, you might not be able to get from point A to point B. So the whole dynamic might be changing. Whereas you might be expecting A1A, and you're not going to get A1A, you might end up getting A1B, C, D, E, F, because that's just because of the proximity they are in relationship to the event. I would think that, there's got to be some type of a compromise at some point, but the reality is that the way that the crews are scheduled now, that might be changing. It might be location, as opposed to where you are in the food chain and what your experience is, and you're part of a crew for we don't know yet. They're still making up the rules for all of this stuff. I know Disney's driving it from our side, and we still don't know what's happening. Carl, what are your thoughts on that from NBC side?
I lost your audio, and then I lost your video, and now I've just got your video and audio back, so I missed the question.
Oh, just talking about travel and the various companies, what they're coming up with, and travel restrictions or travel guidelines, let's call it that. What do you see from your side without giving away too much?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's all, nothing's really decided at this stage. Because there's so many people involved, health and safety, and then the talent themselves. I don't see us I don't see us traveling in the near future, unless we're renting a plane, basically, for a big show, and everybody else, and everybody's staying in the same hotel. That's the only path I can see for our big shows.
Well, if you want to do more complex shows, then is the model to have a real control surface somewhere that somebody can sit behind. And, how do we achieve that? And as Glenn says, they've been doing it with people coming into their facility for a while. But
yeah, but you got the internet that's that big.
Yeah, but if you're sending control signal and monitor audio, I mean, I would argue that having a remote control surface would be less bandwidth than shipping the channels of audio that shipping around that you're doing now.
I think you can go ahead, Len.
Let's say for example, it depends on the size of the show, but RP1 connected to a Artemis over the network is essentially just control data. So it doesn't require a whole lot of bandwidth, and transmission wise, depending on how you're doing it, you know, the high vision with an embedded audio in it can bring you back 16 channels per camera. So it's not difficult. You know, it takes some bandwidth, but you know, the Switch has been doing it, and I think through them and maybe Fox and some other people have been doing it on some of their, even on as little as a 1 gig circuit. So
but going back to what Lucas was saying a little earlier, is it about where you do the processing as opposed to put that in a safe environment? So if you can put the actual processing in a data center or in your facility, you're bringing the audio and you're mixing the audio there. As you were saying, Glenn, the control you're doing is remote. It's just a remote controller at that point, controlling the DSP. The challenge is your monitoring and you know, getting something to queue against for the show. But in terms of the remote control, it's not a big stretch, I don't think. There are obviously, depending on the pipe you've got, there are control latencies to deal with. But we're already, you know, operators are already beginning to get used to that with what they're using.
Henry, what kind of latencies are you talking about?
Sorry, Henry?
What kind of latencies are you talking about?
Well, you from one city to another, you've got what sort of latencies in the US? 20, 30, 40 milliseconds?
That all varies too. I mean, depending on how much data you're putting through.
So the sort of challenges you're going to get with that are when you turn a control on your surface, you might overshoot slightly, and then those are the sort of issues that you're going to have, and you're going to have to, you know, until those latencies come down, you're going to have to find, operators are going to have to see if they can find ways to work with that.
So we made a lot of experience with having consoles and cores being separated since a couple of years now. So starting with our friends in Australia who kicked it off with having the processing core either in the hub in Sydney or in the truck, and then having consoles being floating around and being able to be routed to one of those cores based on VSM. And so we're talking about distances of 8,000 kilometers, and so pinging times around 50 milliseconds maybe. And so our experience was really that it's not too bad. So it's not as crucial as many might think. And the only really crucial bit that might get a little bit stuck or lost if really bandwidth is smashed down, or if out of a sudden the latency increases due to whatever reason, rerouting in the telco network or whatsoever. What you might lose for a fraction is your metering, because this is obviously the only really bandwidth intense, and by bandwidth intense we are still talking about nothing compared to audio, or even more nothing compared to video. So even if your metering might stuck for a minute, for a second, sorry, for a fraction of a second, yes, we got to train our audio engineers that they don't get a heart attack based on that, but it really won't affect your TX, and also the controlling moving faders. For sure, it's also depending on the size of your surface. If you're hooking up 176 faders, it's a different thing than having 48 faders, which should be maybe a good size for at least medium productions to make them happen. And so the question is for me a little bit about the scale. So what do you need what for? Have the right tools in place, and I think the acceptance will anyway increase. And so I'm with Roger, and considering the current times, and no one knows how long the pandemic will really go on. Will there be a second wave whatsoever? And also considering that people are today not allowed, even if people can travel again, and one can travel to the facility and sit in the ACR at the big beautiful console. Considering you have a second A1 or an audio guarantee or an A2 who's supposed to also sit next to you on the console. So with social distancing, even if you're allowed to travel, this will not happen at the moment. And so being able to hook up a daughter child or a daughter desk, or even if it has the same size or a smaller size, at the same time to the same core. So you have two consoles, one locally, one hooked up over VPN, and they can control the same audio. I think this is something that we will see in the next couple of months, and that we will need to be prepared for, and that will maybe also have a good and beneficial thing for every one of us in the future when it comes to economics, when it comes about climate change, and maybe that people at some point have to change their minds about traveling. And then and if it even scales down to the smallest solution, that you have your studio back home with your HUI controller, and you just hook it up to the console while the other A1 is in the facility, even better. But I think there will be clearly a trend over the next months that people have to consider more and more what is really needed to do my job.
Tom and I said we would get some engineers to comment on some of this stuff, and we had some questions. So I think I'm going to throw it to some of the people who came up with questions, and I guess I'll start with Dana, and then Doug and Frito. And Dana, are you there? And you can.
I am here.
If you want.
Okay.
And just hold on a second.
Says the limit's been reached.
No, go ahead. Try again.
Share. There we go. Hey,
hey,
greetings from Star, Idaho. So one of the benefits of living here in Idaho is I have a full control room already in my basement. I've got 5.1 monitoring and a Yamaha DM2000 and a full Pro Tools rig. I've spent the last few weeks trying to figure out how to integrate all this into integrating into some of these other systems. I did a demo of Unity Connect and Unity Intercom, and through Unity Connect, I took my laptop and created, I ran Unity Connect on my laptop and created a Dante network within the house, and was able to ship the Dante down to the studio, the DM2000, and using Pro Tools as a virtual mixer and the DM2000 as a control surface, I was able to chip the audio back and forth. And that seemed down and dirty. I could do it without a lot of hardware purchasing. And that all seemed really cool. 2 days ago, I was logged into a vMix server that was in the cloud, and I detached the audio window, or actually the person that was hosting the server did that. And I was able to drag the audio window into two of my monitors here at home using TeamViewer. And I was able to control the audio from the vMix server from home. And that seemed pretty cool. And the upgrade there would be to get a HUI and to be able to control faders and not mixing on a mouse. So that also seemed like a cool solution for short term. But I mean, long term, a couple of things I'd like to see, but maybe from CalRec is, what if we dropped a Brio in my house? Could I access a TV truck's Hydra 2 network and be able to access the tape machines and the spot boxes and the graphics noises and go back and forth utilizing the Hydra 2 network, and then remotely accessing the announcers and in effects. But using the truck as a core, and then eventually, being able to control it off the truck system off of just as simple as a Brio, which seems to be a cost-effective solution, or a Lavo MP36.
Yeah, I guess with the Brio, you end up, because the Brio is a self-contained console, you end up with some processing in the Brio itself anyway. So I guess what you're really talking about is connecting the Hydra 2 network that you have around the Brio with a Hydra 2 network at base.
Right. I mean, we do it all the time where we remote a Brio, like, on baseball, they remote one up to the announce booth, and all the facilities from the truck are available upstairs at the Brio. What's the distance limitation on this? I mean, could we go 1,000 miles?
Well, the challenge with the Hydra 2 networking is that it's proprietary, so it won't easily go through off-the-shelf switches. So one of the things that we've been looking at for a while actually is some sort of interface box that would convert Hydra 2 to an IP stream and vice versa. So that's probably a direction we should increase looking at for you.
But it just seems logical.
Earlier, why ship the audio around? Why not just ship control around and just plunk a control surface in Dana's house and keep him busy? We don't spend all that time driving to the airport. Henry?
Sorry,
You mean like put an Artemis control surface in his house instead of the Brio? And then...
I mean, I'm sure, this commercially, this could be made to work. Game Creek owns it, whatever. It's under contract, gets dropped off. I mean, I think it can work commercially, and the economics of not flying Dana around are probably pay for that.
Yeah, but I guess, Dana, you're interested in getting audio monitoring back to your house.
Well, there's going to be latency on all this stuff, and it's just something we're going to have to get used to. But it seems like the Unity Connect, their internal latency was pretty fast. I mean, I think if all the connections are proper, it's under a frame, and the internal processing of my Dante network was 6 milliseconds. So I mean, it's not terrible, but it still exists.
Yeah, I think it depends on also like how much money you're willing to spend. You could do it on J2K and have it there in milliseconds. It just depends on who's paying for you to mix at home and if they're going to provide the facilities that you need to mix from home. If you're setting this up yourself, then maybe Unity Connect and a Dante network, and hey, I'm an A1 that can mix from home. But it has to be built to the spec that keeps it redundant and keeps you from making any mistakes, I guess.
Well, it all goes back to that economic picture of, okay, if Dana could do that, but he doesn't have to spend a day of travel and even a day of setup, he could mix high-end or higher-end shows. He could mix 4 or 5 days a week from different. One day he's mixing a show that originates in Philadelphia. The next day he mixes a show that originates in Austin, Texas. The next day is from somewhere else, and he doesn't have to spend X time in the travel envelope.
Yeah. Well, let's ask somebody else.
I think that's where the economy. It's the economy of scale at that point.
Yeah. Fred, are you there?
I'm gonna hide. There you go.
Hi, Fred.
Fred?
Hi, Fred.
I thought Fred was here.
We hear him.
You can't figure out how to unmute his microphone. Let's see.
All right. How's that?
You can turn your camera on too now. Dana's dropped off if you want.
There you go.
Hey,
Hey, Fred.
Hey, there he is.
this has been fabulous. I've been sitting back and listening and watching, and just love everybody's different perspectives and all of that stuff. I think for me, I would love to be able to make my fuzzy slippers at home. I don't think that Glenn can take a lot of that. And I know Glenn and I have talked about that, but I think it's going to depend on the size of the show. As we start getting more of these higher end marquee events where they become more complex, I don't think we are going to have a chance to do that. I think there are too many downfalls to that. I think the stakes are too high financially for the network to do that. But I think maybe moving some of the smaller shows to either homes or even production houses. I see that happening fairly quickly.
Yeah, I think
But
there's
a lot of those,
go Tom.
a lot of those big shows have other things that associated with it, like social media and stream shows, studio shows, where those could actually be split off and done remotely, while the big shows remains on site.
Right, absolutely. So, and maybe that's something for us guys that are getting near to retirement. That's an option for us to continue to help and do our, thanks, Henry.
That was a swipe at Dana.
Yeah, exactly. So stay involved, without having to travel, and with this, this pandemic that's going on. I'm somewhat concerned about my health too, getting back on airplanes. I'm somewhat concerned about being out and about with this. So taking my health into consideration, that might be something to consider too, is not just from a financial perspective, but from a health perspective for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're all kind of thinking into the same direction, and it seems like the acceptance of staying at home and mixing from home is growing, and it depends on making available the right tools in the right time, and to guarantee that the guys, even if they don't have a full-fledged console back at their home, have fast access to what they really need, and not by scrolling through virtual windows all the time to really find the bit and piece that is going wrong, but to just have something in front of you that you can touch and feel like a hardware panel, and then go where things are going wrong.
Was another question? I think Doug or
Doug and John, I think Jonathan's queued up too. We'll go to Doug. Doug, you can unmute yourself, I think, and you can.
I am unmuted if you can hear me.
Oh, hi Doug. You sound good.
Hey, how's everybody doing? Hey, Carl.
You
got to email me that PDF of the remote stuff. That was great stuff. There's my camera. I did have a question. I also kind of wanted to chime in on this discussion we're having about, popping not that I have a giant room here, but popping an Artemis in here and working at home. Short answer, I'm not a big fan of the idea. I don't think it's going to be an issue real soon. Like if you look at the release from MTVG yesterday, where they're talking about cloud remoting a lot of these regional sport network things, you notice the only people that are left in the truck are the TD, the A1, and video. Just because that's where the cores are, I think it's easier at that point. But for me personally, I loved doing the Olympics, but a lot of what I loved about doing the Olympics was sitting around with Dane in the hotel lobby in the middle of nowhere, Korea, and drinking soju and talking about our day and learning stuff from him. And I would miss that opportunity. And I personally like the travel. I like being in different cities, and that's a big part of the job for me. I think part of the other thing, and I had some experience this last winter when NEP put a control room in at Pitt University and basically networked all the venues there together. So now when I go to do a Pitt basketball game or a Pitt wrestling match, I'm going to one of their generic control rooms and I'm doing it there. And the technology works great, but something that bothers me about the whole thing is I can't really do my basketball show anymore. I'm kind of limited to doing what is set up for the facility. You know, in other words, what makes my show is not there. And again, this is the first year for them, and it's newer technology for them. But from my point of view, it kind of reduced the show to the lowest common denominator. In other words, we're trying to get the easiest basketball show that everybody can do on the air, and I just don't see that happening for huge shows. I mean, if at the point where, you know, I get up in the morning and I'm like going to the office and just pushing recall and mixing a show and hang it up, that not only takes some of the fun out of it for me, but I think it takes some of the challenge out of it for me, and it takes some of the personality out of it for me. And I think those are non-technical problems that need to be looked at too.
Fully agreed.
Personality aside, though, I mean, the thing is that the facility-wise, you could get eventually, we could give you everything that you need. So I imagine one of the issues is that you don't have enough monitors. If you're sitting at home, you need to be able to see everything in order to know, you know, the reporters getting ready on the field. And you can see it happening. You don't, if you have a single monitor, maybe a multi-viewer will help that. I don't know, but there's definitely a change of how you just change of how you mix, really, you know. And then comms as well, you know, having all the people that you have gotten used to listening to, director, producer, in your overheads, now you're listening to them possibly somewhere else. You have to try and maintain the same workflow to a certain extent. You need to have hot mics of your producer, director. So I think you can get all those things, but it's just a new way of working. And I mean, I'm not promoting it, but I think technically we can bring everything to the home if we have the bandwidth, but mixing it is a totally different situation.
That's an interesting point. Actually, it was a technical question. I will get off my soapbox, and I actually did have a technical question, because we talked a little bit about integrating intercom, which is a huge part of the audio thing. I mean, obviously, like Henry, for your studio shows, they're wanting pre-listens above their IFBs like they normally had when they were in the studio. And as we start to move mixing cores away from the rest of things, as you get to a more decentralized system, I mean, like one of the things I thought about was GPIs. You know, if the audio core is someplace different than the switcher core, can I get a GPI from the switcher to trigger my handheld camera mics when you cut to a handheld shot, or graphics noise and things like that? I'm just curious from a technical standpoint how that works.
Well, it's just slightly different. I mean, you can use virtual GPI now, what you might call virtual GPIO, but it's just data at the end of the day. All a GPIO is a signal to say, okay, I want this to switch on and off, or I want this to, you know, if we can manage to send streamed audio over over an IP link, we can definitely manage to send GPIO tallies. That's the challenge is, I suppose, is the integration of them, and you know, whether you need a hardware box at the other end to translate that virtual into a physical GPIO, rather depends what you want to connect it to. But even that is there's no real technical challenge to that. One of the areas, I don't know if you've got any experience on this, Lucas, but one of the areas that does concern me is the speed with which GPIOs will work across that sort of link, and obviously they're not going to be as fast, but whether they're fast enough for most applications, probably they are, but there are some time sensitive applications where maybe they won't be.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, talking about virtual GPIOs, I think it's very much up to the control system to consolidate that and to be able to talk to different vendors and their style of bringing virtual GPIOs into the network. And so while we see an increasing user base for Ember Plus and other vendors jumping on the Ember Plus train, it's certainly in the end some kind of middleware required to connect those kind of virtual GPIOs. But yeah, I'm with Henry. I think we have some good proven technology out there that can solve this kind of problem. Yeah.
You know, Lucas, I would love to be able to say something like VSM software that could take the place of the Dante controller. The fact
Yep.
that we're trying to emulate RTS or even Readle with partial saves, that's almost impossible to do with a Dante
Yep.
controller. And having a GUI that you can kind of customize to what we're used to would be advantageous, I think.
I hear you, absolutely. So what we can already do today is to make Dante controller be a part of the VSM environment. So we can natively integrate Dante controller into VSM, having an XY matrix in there, and to also recall that based on storage groups, so the status within Dante controller. But we'll certainly also see a move forward, thinking about 2110 and yeah, current technology that we're all looking at, that we're all experiencing in, and that we see being deployed more and more. And well, I think it's out of the question that we see real life working 2110 environments out there where we will need that kind of solution that you're looking for, Henry. Absolutely agreed.
Yeah, I mean, you can't, any size network that you have that you guys are dealing with without some sort of centralized controller that is controlling not just a Dante network, but controlling all the 2110-30 streams and all the video, all the streamed video streams. It doesn't have to be the same controller. I mean, things like one of the big advantages of the NMOS approach is that you can have multiple NMOS servers on the network. So you might have your favorite one doing the video streaming, you might have the favorite one doing the audio streaming, you might have multiple servers on the network. As long as you don't have too many, we don't want to flood the network too much. But there is, that is definitely an area where I'm sure Lucas and us guys at CalRec are going as fast as we can.
I've got another question for Carl and Glenn, and this has to do with lip sync. A1s are the last eyes and ears on the signal before it goes out, making sure that lip sync is always correct. Given the current climate, and we've been very forgiving about watching interviews now on television, you've kind of just like closed your eyes and not watching the lip sync. How do you foresee handling this going down the road if we are going to end up mixing something in the home and you're dealing with the internet, dealing with all the lip sync issues? How do you know what's right at that point, or do you just kind of like let it go?
I think the first thing during a pandemic, if everybody wears a mask, I think we'll be fine.
Hey, I can get some other questions.
There's a
Some other,
Henry,
not to jump on your lap.
I can
but I'm just gonna put
Henry, we can
Jonathan
talk
on.
offline.
I was going to put Fred on. I mean, I'm sorry, we put Jonathan on if you're there, Frito. Did you drift away?
But Henry, to your point, I think also you have to pick one thing, and once you pick that one thing and you get used to it, and you sync it up, whatever that return audio is, I think you have to believe something. You just have to choose what to believe.
Just watch it on TV. Oh, hey, Jonathan.
Hey, Jonathan.
Hello.
Bars are open.
Audio
I'll have another
kitchen.
cold.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
We can hear you.
I know that highway out to Cape Cod gets pretty long sometimes in the summer,
There's no traffic on it whatsoever. It's the right time to see it. So I have three key questions. By the way, thank you all. This has been spectacular. I love the points of view that everybody has brought up, and I'm learning a lot about technologies I know nothing about, and I guess I have to dive into the internet and figure some shit out. My first question that I don't know anything about is how much latency is there in the video return to, let's say, a mixer at home in their kitchen?
For us, it's about
Depends
10.
on how you encode it.
Yeah, for us, it's about 10 milliseconds at the moment, maybe a little bit less.
Yeah.
I'd have to check with what we're using for certainly for high visions, but I think I don't know for the for Unity Connect actually, but I know it's definitely less than the high visions.
Yeah, it's variable actually. I mean, you can set it for as low as 20 millisecond the latency, and as high up as seconds, depending on your signal quality.
That sounds familiar. Yeah, 20.
Yeah,
I think.
but the other thing that we were using too is we were using the Hitomi glass. We're starting to develop that so that we can actually time the audio and video signals, let's say from a talent's home, just using the app and being able to read that back so we can do the offset accurately.
So the question really relates to the latency of the video from the live event to the mixer, wherever the mixer is, because already with multi-viewers, et cetera, in the truck, in a normal circumstance, there's enough latency in a multi-viewer that some sports are very difficult to respond to in real time. So let's not forget that, the crack of a bat, the bounce of a basketball, the kick of a football, those things are happening in real time. If we can't respond to them pretty close to real time, we're not really mixing the same kind of show that we're used to. So obviously, without the crowd, there isn't as much chasing of dynamic sounds in this kind of environment, but still that video latency is super critical. So
Well,
I'm not so much talking, Henry, about the time delay with the audio and the video or syncing them back up. It's just the ability to respond to something that's happening in real time somewhere else. So how delayed is our response going to be when we're at home?
well, it depends on, number one, how it's encoded and how it's packaged together. So for us, with using JPEG 2000 and having the audio embedded at the source, those two things are completely in time. So when they reach the plant, they're still in time. So when you're sitting at, the mixing control that's in San Francisco and the game is in Oregon, well, it's still in time because it's an embedded signal. You don't know that the crack of the bat was 50 milliseconds earlier because that's not how you're mixing to the picture, right? It's the biggest delay problem that we had in the beginning was like you said, is the monitors. Our multi-view monitors are 120 milliseconds out. So we just had to adjust the room for that. And everything else, it's all packaged together in that JPEG 2000 stream, which I don't even know what the latency between transmission and when we get it is, because it really doesn't matter to us. I hope that.
So you're saying in your case, the audio is delayed by the same amount the video is. So
Correct.
Only to the plant, but by the time it gets to Jonathan's house and it gets onto a multi-viewer, it's off. Yeah.
Correct.
Well, what I'm saying is the event has already happened. We're capturing video of something that's happening in real time. I need to respond to it as it's happening in real time, right? When you're in a truck with a multi-viewer with 3 frames of delay, that becomes challenging. So by the time I see something, it's already happened.
Yeah, I mean, I think at this stage, you're not mixing the show that you normally mix. I mean, that's what we're talking about now.
That's true. So it's a different world now. So one of the things that's going to happen though is because there's no crowd, there's no music, there's a lot more focus on what's actually happening with what you're looking at. You really are going to want things to be good and accurate and all that stuff. So I'm just concerned for how that's going to work. I'd like to actually lay my hands on it and see how it works and see how it sounds. But I'm concerned about the video delay, not so much matching the audio back up with the video, but the video delay to the audio operator needs to be as short as possible. And like I said, that's already a challenge in a truck, in the live environment with a multi-viewer that's not instantaneous, at least for the sports that I do. So baseball, football, kicks, etc. And yes, it will be different with no crowd. We're not exactly sure yet. So anyway, that's just one point. I want to ask another couple of questions. This one's really important to me. Like, who will be in the truck with the engines? What kind of backups are in place in case the remote control fails? So you're putting a lot of demand on the personnel that are in the truck. If it's 1 engineer, 2 engineers, whoever is there, they actually kind of need to be able to back the show up if it's a high profile show that somebody's banking a lot of dollars on. So there's another argument for the TD, the A1, the video guide to be in the truck where they can control the engine. If they're not there, if we're not there, someone really, you know, octopus-like needs to be there.
Well, the other question is, should the cores, I mean, long-term, should the cores, is that where the cores should be, or should they be in some central safe location, or heaven forbid in the cloud, you know? I mean,
Well, all the cameras are there, so you might as well have the cores. I mean, you're going to have a hub there, so is there really any reason why it's safer, you know, in a you know, production headquarters or at the venue? You know, if all your cameras, we're not yet talking about bringing all the cameras back. I don't know. Well, what are we talking about, Jonathan? We're talking about, you know, having the truck there, but taking the feeds locally, but then having the A1 offsite, just having camera operators there.
Well, I think the other question too is, I mean, we're talking about remoting the A1s, but I mean, at some point you got to draw the line somewhere. But you're going to say the higher quality, the higher exposed shows would actually have the A1 on site. I mean, the trucks are going to be able to have certain amount of people in the trucks. That has yet to be determined. So yeah, Jonathan, to your point, the TD and A1, that's two. Start figuring out how many other people that you absolutely have to have in the truck and how many people you can pull out. Do the graphics people have to be in the truck? Do the EVS replay people have to be in the truck? What NASCAR did this past weekend, all the replay operators were in LA, and it seemed like you had a very smaller core crew in the truck. So I'm assuming the A1 was obviously the one of the core people.
Absolutely. This is Fred. Yes, McCluskey was on site there and taking everything in. He did the main mix from the truck on site.
Right. Yeah. You know, I'm talking about maybe the C and D level games that are getting the 500 to 1,000 people watching them. You know, those are the games that you might want to consider doing a remote access.
Well, also the A1 is socially distanced anyway in all trucks that I know of. Anyway, I mean they're sitting in their own booth, so
right. Just lock the doors this time.
Yeah.
Figuratively and literally.
Try to do that
anyway. With people. So
you know, Henry, I got a lot of volunteers here that are ready to just try out your remote access.
So I think, I mean, I think in the long run, on the biggest shows, Henry, you're going to have a TD and an A1 on site. You're going to have to have an A2 or more on site to set all the mics up. And obviously an A1 can pitch in with that. But you know, there's a lot of work to be done on site, and there's a lot of engine babysitting that's hypercritical on the big shows. So I think that's just something we need to talk about and be aware of with safety in the trucks, safety in traveling. You know, how do we do that workflow and have the right people in the truck where the engines are, if that's the model. On the B, C, D, E, F types of shows, yes, we can do a tremendous amount of stuff remotely. And I think that's a fantastic idea.
Yeah. Well, I think, Jonathan, you bring up the exact point that, you know, all the network management's trying to figure out is, you know, who doesn't have to be there. And that's I think really the end of the day, what you know, if we can provide people the tools that they don't have to be there, who are those people? So I think that's really the next step of this, is really looking at, you know, what functions could we actually take out of the truck and remote back. So, you know, I brought up things like the wraparound studio show, the social media live stream, you know, all of those add-ons to the big show. Do they really have to be there? And if we could provide them the control that they could do it from wherever they are, whether they go into an office or do it from home, I think that's the way that we can satisfy the constraints of, you know, social distancing and not traveling people around, yet still delivering the shows that we want to produce. So I think that's really what, at least from my point of view, is, you know, what I want to see from the manufacturing side is, you know, if there's ways that we can take channels and remote those channels off. So the A1, yes, they set out the mics. With the A2s, they set out the mics. They check everything, make sure it's up and working. But now they can push the control of those channels off to someone else and just concentrate on their show, while again the social media or studio guys have the controls they need to operate, you know, their programs. So it's kind of like a hybrid. It's kind of like a hybrid. You still have an on-site presence, but you can take groups, you can take channels or groups of channels and remote them away.
I think we're going to find that we're going to come up with a compromise at some point in time. I think, you know, going through this pandemic, it's not going to last forever. At some point in time, we will get back to some normalcy. And I think that by trying the things and doing the things we're doing now, we're going to figure out, as will management, what works, what doesn't work. And I think we're going to come up with a compromise just like that, Tom. Who do we actually need on site? Who do we not need on site? This is going to, I think, filter some of that stuff out on its own once we start getting back to some normalcy. I mean, you know, along with what Jonathan was saying, I think there truly does need to be some redundancy or even on site, the mixers on the higher level shows and even the lower level shows. I think, you know, my concern there is that we're going to compromise quality by not being able to mix our show as we like to mix them. You know, like Doug Deems was saying, you know what? I think we're going to take some of the finesse out of the show if we're not on site. Part of being on site is the excitement, like the announcers, you know, of the game itself, being there, interacting and being a part of that. And once you start taking us out of our environment, I think the shows are going to become more sterile. And I think that, you know, my hope is that we don't compromise quality for, you know, going down this path that we're going.
Yeah, well, I personally don't think anybody that's, you know, is on this panel or has been, you know, asking questions have anything to worry about, because the shows you do are too big and important that we're not going to go down that path. But it's all the other shows, like Henry was saying, the C, D, E, all the way to the Z level shows that don't have the budgets, and every penny they can save matters. I think that's where you're going to see the big push to change the model based on what we've experienced through this pandemic. And when they start looking at the financial side of things, not having to build big expensive control rooms, when they can not have dedicated spaces and be able to move a control surface around, or again, if they contract a mixer or ship it off to their place for the season. So I think that's where, again, looking at the manufacturers that can help us fulfill that with smaller modular type control surfaces that can be arranged and configured in ways that you can take control of just a handful of channels or a full desk if you needed to. I think that's probably some of the things that we're going to be looking at.
Absolutely, I'm 100% with you, and maybe to come back to what has been mentioned earlier, I don't see the top-notch shows like Olympics or Super Bowl or whatsoever to be happen fully remote, because as it has been said, it's also something about being there and being part of the crew there, to being able to bring that experience and that level of excitement back home to the people that are sitting in front of the TV watching that show. And at the same time, I mentioned it earlier, and I really like the point that while we are doing all of this and while we are trying to now get set up something that is working, we shouldn't miss that the overall goal, which is for me that we don't put on risk what we are in the end putting on TX, so what we're transferring to the people back home, because this is our product, and this is in the end what is paying all the bills for every one of us who's here in the panel and who's listening. And this is really the crucial thing that should be maintained. And Tom, I perfectly understood your message towards us, towards Henry, the Calvert guys, towards Lavo, and yeah, that's actually the travel that we're gonna make over the next couple of weeks to really help the people, showing them, okay, so we sat back in our room and made our head around how we can help you, and this is what we got. Now we're doing webinars to bring it to you and to also show the people that it's not rocket science, because it needs to be easy. Otherwise, people won't be able to set it up back at their homes. And it can be easy. We are there. There's technology to do it in that way and to do it inexpensive. And for the future, yeah, it might be different when talking about decentralized or centralized or however you want to name it. Depends on the point of view. So yeah, I think there's some exciting time coming for everybody of us, but yeah, of course, I hope that at some point we are also able to meet again in person.
Yeah, certainly look forward to that. We'll have one more question from Doug, and then we're way over time, so we'll just take this one last from Doug.
I'll make it quick. I just wanted to jump in to say that, you know, while I am not personally thrilled with the idea of working from home, I am not at all opposed to the idea in general. I think this technology is really amazing. And I think in the long run, by lowering the cost of productions, you're going to get more productions on the air and thereby bring more people into this business. And I think that is overall a good thing.
Thanks, Doug. That's Notre Dame at home then.
Yeah, and
yeah, if you can convince Pierre and Rob of that, sure.
and we have found that when we make those economies of not sending everyone and doing it from home, we actually add to the show. We can add super slow-mo. We can afford to add super slow-mo to a show, whereas if we had to send anybody, we wouldn't be able to afford the super slow-mo. So we actually get something in return.
Okay, I think we're way past our time, so I just want to thank everyone for participating, for staying with us through all of this. Certainly want to thank everyone on the panel for taking the time to share your thoughts and ideas and just your experiences in this, and for Henry and Lucas for sacrificing your evening to join us. Thank you very much. We certainly look forward to continuing this conversation because number one, it's very important that we keep our people safe and offer them the best tools that they can have to do their job. It's a tough time, and we're asking a lot of them, and we appreciate all the assistance that we can get from you. And you've been very good to this, to us, and we want to continue the relationship with you. So thank you again. Roger, you have any last words?
Thanks, everybody. I really appreciate it. I noticed that everyone stayed. I apologize that we ran so long, but I think it was such a fascinating concept, and it's great to have all the mixers listening in too and commenting. It's really been great, really interesting. So I hope this is also another conversation we'll be able to keep going with in the future. So thank you all, and thanks everybody at home. And that's it.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Thanks, Roger.
Thanks,
Tom.
everybody.
Guys,
Good day, everyone.
keep safe.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.